until all have heard.
Welcome to Friends in Action International's podcast, where we share stories of faith and impact from around the world. I'm your host, Andy Bachert, and behind the scenes, the editor and producer of our podcast, Emily Lingle. Today, we are honored to be joined by Paul Brosey, the grounds and facility manager here at Friends in Action. He's been a valued member of FIA for many years. Paul is transitioning into a reduced schedule as he approaches a valuable stage in his life, desiring to spend more time with family. So we want to take this opportunity to share his journey and wisdom to our listeners. So Paul, thank you for being here today.
Andy, it's a privilege to be here.
So Paul, let's get things started off just a little bit on the personal side before we dive into kind of what you do here at Friends in Action. Tell us a little bit about your background and where you grew up.
Andy, I was actually born out in California. I have three brothers, and so we grew up on a farm. Enjoyed all the privileges of being out in the open farm, but also enjoyed all the work that went along with it in terms of working in the fields, putting hay away. We had the privilege of hunting in the fields, chasing pheasants and rabbits. So it was a great childhood. And so pretty much that would have typified my growing up years all the way through high school.
Good. So what kind of work were you involved in before you came to Friends in Action?
Andy, I was, during my teen years, I worked for neighbors' farms. I did everything from helping them put tobacco away to, I did work for one neighbor that was a truck farmer. And by that, he would buy a produce and then resell it at places like Roots and Green Dragon. I think we were in Green Dragon. We went up to Lewisburg and had a stand up there. So
nice. So for our local listeners, they're very familiar with Green Dragon and Roots and how popular a place is for farm market type of food. So interesting. So so you grew up farm, working hard, working through what that looked like to do hard labor, manual labor. Where was there a pivotal point then in your life, or when did you feel called, not just to Friends in Action, but when did you feel called into some type of missions work or some type of kingdom? I'll call it kingdom work because it's not always about just being a missionary, but kingdom work.
Well, Andy, when I was a senior in high school, I was attending a church that had a missions conference, and one of the speakers there was a missionary from Alaska. And as he spoke, I really sensed that God was touching my heart that I should really consider that. That was a little bit of a struggle for me because I had, to that point, not really considered college, but I knew, at least from my background, I knew that if you wanted to be a missionary, you needed to have a Bible education. So I applied to Philadelphia College of Bible, now Cairn University, and was accepted with some reservation. I was kind of on probation because my academics weren't what you would call stellar. But I did, and I did attend and was able to complete the course. It was during those years that I learned to work in the construction field because that was a good paying job. So I worked my way through college, didn't borrow any money, and each summer I found a different kind of a construction job. Usually ended up being steel of some sort, rod busting, helping to build some bridges over a local highway that was going in. And actually, between my junior and senior year, I got a job at TMI. And for the first time, I was educated in terms of what union work was all about.
Educated in union work. I like how you put that. Politically correct, I'm sure. Well, that's good. So yeah, again, that's an interesting path because going from a farmer's kid and, get kind of moving away from that farming atmosphere, you felt drawn into ministry, going to Cairn University, and just feeling that pull because the missionary from Alaska kind of spoke into kind of what God had prepared you for. But again, recognizing that you need to make money and start your career and things like that. So through that, when did you first hear about FIA, Friends in Action? When did you first understand maybe a little bit about what we do that kind of sparked that interest?
Well, Andy, to do that, I need to perhaps give you a little pathway.
Sure, please do.
Because once I graduated from Cairn, Kathy and I got married. I met Kathy there, or because of that. And we were married in September of 72 when I graduated in May of 22. Shortly after we were married, we did a 6-month mission trip to Alaska, and it was interesting. We went, they needed some inside carpentry work done because in the wintertime, it's all inside work, or mostly inside work. And we went up in November. We got off the plane, and it was 40 below. So we were introduced to some cold weather. Interestingly enough, January it got cold and went to 60 below. So we were out a real taste of what harsh winters can be, but also had a taste of that perhaps God was calling us there. In talking with the mission director there, their recommendation was that we would attend a cross-cultural training. So we went to a cross-cultural training school, I guess you would say, in Michigan for 9 months. I graduated from that, but together we did not have a sense of peace about going to Alaska. So we were a little puzzled by that, but God opened a door for us to be to join a mission called Village Missions, and we were sent to the state of Washington, where I was a village missionary pastor. While my education at Cairn University was Christian Ed, being a pastor was a totally different perspective, and a real step of faith in trusting God to lead that way. We were there for 5 years, and at that point, they felt as though they needed a pastor with more experience, even though the church had grown from about 20 people to about 60 people. So Kathy and I came back to Pennsylvania, and at that point, I picked up my hammer. And in a brief sense, for the next 30 years, I was in construction, learning and exercising my construction skills from all aspects. Interesting, at that point, when the economy took a dive to this, and my phone stopped ringing, I needed to find other work. So I took a job for 4 years working with a online warranty company. And after 4 years, I'm saying, Lord, I got to get away from this computer.
Yeah, I love you, brother, but you're not fit for behind a desk.
And about that time, Tim Johnson was visiting our church. He came under the invite of his secretary that was attending our church, Deb Littner.
Okay.
And so as he came and visited our life group, an adult Sunday school class, Kathy looked at me and says, Paul, that's you. And so we set up a 1-hour interview with Tim Johnson. 3 hours later, if you know Tim Johnson, we were convinced that this is where God would have us go. And so we made that transition. I gave my notice to the warranty company and started my transfer to being a part of Friends in Action International.
Interesting. So it's neat to see that you just didn't feel God settling you in Alaska, but then got called to Washington, and then through that, your journey brings you back to construction. So you were in ministry, then you were I'll just say for profit or in the job market, and then back into ministry once you were introduced to Tim at church.
Right.
So, and I have had that conversation with Tim. That's why I'm sitting in this seat today. So, I completely understand that he has a way of allowing God to reveal what He has for your future, and that is a powerful realization. And then to have the confirmation from Kathy that Paul, this is exactly what you need to be doing. So that's great. So before we get into the specifics of your everyday or what it looks like now as grounds and facilities manager, we're in this barn today because a lot of the equipment and tools and things that are part of Paul's everyday job are in the shop here. So I thought it would be great to shoot this podcast in the barn, get some of that feeling. So Paul, you were introduced to Friends in Action through Tim. Unpack that then. I explained the barn here on the property, but explain to the audience your important role here at Friends in Action once you joined.
Yeah, I joined on as the project and team coordinator. Now that was a broad term.
Or it just meant they would have a lot for you to do.
Yeah, it really was pretty much it.
That's right.
The first project they asked me to do was to oversee or be the project manager for the new international headquarters. Well, that sounded okay. And then they gave me the blueprints, and I realized I'm looking at a $3 million project, which was way more than any house that I built or any store that I remodeled or anything of that nature. But we had a major contractor. The prime contractor would have been Scenic Ridge. And I worked very closely with their project manager, Dave Lake. With that, my role was to make sure the subcontractors were here on time and in good order. I also managed a number of volunteers. And I would say over the course of the 2 years of construction, we probably had well over 100 volunteers from time to time that provided help to do anything from laying wire mesh for concrete floors to putting up interior walls and painting, just a lot of things that volunteers can do, and saved Friends in Action really a lot of money in terms of their gift to what God was doing through Friends in Action.
If I remember some of the stories, I mean, the really cool thing about working with Scenic Ridge is they would allow volunteers to come and work with them.
Yes.
So it's been a great connection with a local general contractor, Friends in Action for many, many years. But yeah, like you said, that's kind of where you first started. So explain to me a little bit how you navigated volunteers on we'll say $3 million construction project. I mean, safety and all, of course, we followed under the guidelines of Scenic Ridge, but just the management of volunteers. Explain to me how you navigated those waters.
Yeah, that was, I had to find out, first of all, what kind of skill level they had. We had some professional volunteers. We had a company come in and lay all the block work for free. We had operators that operated equipment to put in stormwater lines and to build the stormwater retention pond. One thing I found out was that there was no permits purchased when I was first given the project. So I had to make sure everything was in line for that. And the first thing that we had to do was get a sewage permit because there was no sewage. And so it just kind of, my background in having built a number of homes, having worked with some light commercial, all kind of played into my ability to manage the subcontractors, to manage volunteers, to find out what their abilities were, to put them in areas where they could be effective without being without being overwhelmed.
Yeah, that's great. Effective but not overwhelmed. I like that.
So it was a challenging project, to say the least, but one that I actually relished. I enjoyed that, being able to manage the volunteers, being able to bring out their best and to encourage them. And actually, my job was, even though I was skilled in some of these areas, I was kept busy keeping them busy. So
yeah. So I don't know if you remember this. So my wife and I had just started coming to church, where we go to church together, and her and I actually came out and helped lay the concrete mesh, I think, in the second warehouse. I don't know if you remember us coming out. I think it was a Saturday morning.
it could be.
Yeah. I when I started prep for this podcast, I thought, you know what? I do remember coming out here when it was still under construction. Didn't know anything about FIA other than you let the church know you were looking for volunteers. And we came out and helped lay some of the mesh. So just really interesting and beautiful headquarters. We recently went under some updating and renovations.
Andy, one thing that I should mention is that the volunteers weren't all non-construction people. Actually, the second warehouse was erected by Scenic Ridge, but it was their men volunteering their time to put up the superstructure. All the beams and posts were erected by volunteers from Scenic Ridge.
That's great. Yeah, great partnership with that company. So that was kind of your first major project, and well done. We have a beautiful headquarters, lots of space to grow into, as well as we grow in as an organization for many years to come. So transitioning, explain a little bit from that. Then you started your role as teams coordinator. Just give us a little bit of background in that before we roll into your current position.
Yeah, when I first started, they wanted me to be the team coordinator. Actually, Tim Johnson was very heavily involved in Nicaragua, so he was kind of taking care of those teams. But I was asked to oversee some teams going other places. We weren't doing a lot of teams in those years. I think we did like 3 or 4 a year, and I could manage that. I learned a lot. Learned about air travel. Learned a lot about. Well, I shouldn't say I learned. I was able to exercise what I had learned already in terms of making adjustments on the fly with limited abilities. I remember taking a team to Vanuatu, and the container was not out of port yet. And for the most of part of that first week, we did other things. I think, Andy, you were actually on that team. So we did welding. We did all kinds of things that would have been needed for the overall project, but not necessarily why we were there initially. But God has given us the opportunity had given me the opportunity to lead those kind of teams. Led some teams to Nicaragua. I led teams to Vanuatu.
So, Paul, you mentioned the trip in 2018 to Vanuatu. So I had my first exposure to FIA was many, many years ago. I volunteered back in 2002 on a trip to West Africa, but I lost contact with Friends in Action. Life gets away from you. I not to tell my story, but I pulled away from really kingdom work and was more focused on my career and my success. So I kind of moved away from Friends in Action. But other than volunteering here with the mesh at the warehouse in 2018, you had approached me about connecting with Friends in Action to going to Vanuatu. And if you heard my wife's podcast, she mentions her heart for Vanuatu too. But that was our first exposure as a family to missions and what that may look like. And you're right. You've learned to pivot you had to learn to pivot because we waited on that container, and I was basically a welder with no steel and no consumables. Well, I had some consumables because you found equipment that needed repaired and patched and things like that. So yeah, you were be able to manage the volunteers there and be able to disperse them accordingly. And it worked out well. So pivoting is key for that role. So moving into teams, what was one of your, can you share a story of a kind of a God story that you experienced personally?
Yeah, one of the trips I took to Nicaragua, I was asked to build onto a small building, and I was given two local Rama men to work with me, and the one man was Jose, and their role was to do the grunt work, if you will, mix the mortar, carry the block, and I was supposed to lay it. And I got the corner started. And then it's like the Spirit prompted me and says, teach these guys how to do it. So it took a little longer, but I taught Jose and his friend how to lay block, how to make sure the corners were plumb and square, how to use a string to make sure the lines were, the blocks were kept good and straight. And at the end of that project, we were getting ready to leave, and Jose introduced me to his family. And I come to find out that was very unusual because they kind of keep separate, or at that point they were keeping separate. So I got to talk to Jose a little bit, and he knew a little bit of English, but he didn't know a whole lot. And we had mentioned over the weekends when we weren't working that there were 6 baseball teams from the island that would come over to the mainland and play baseball. I mean, they were playing hardball baseball, and these were not teenagers; these were adults, and it was a very unique experience. Well, Jose was on one of those teams, and I noticed that the teams would have very limited baseball gloves. The people in the field, most of them had gloves, but they always left the glove in the field so the next team could use it. It was a very limited number. I also noticed that in those early years, they had carved out their own baseball bats, which was very interesting.
I didn't hear that part. Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, the early years, that's the way it was. And anyways, as we were getting ready to leave, Jose asked me a little bit, and we were talking about his family, and then he said, Pablo, which is Paul in Spanish. He said, Pablo, how much is a baseball glove? And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, oh, Jose. Because I knew that they did not have a lot of financial resources. And I said, well, a used one we can probably get for $30 or $40, US dollars. He goes, oh, well, I could see the disappointment in his voice. And because I knew that $40 was probably 2 weeks of pay for him, at least. And I knew there was no way he could give up 2 weeks of pay to get a baseball glove. So anyways, in the process then, we became friends. I got on the boat and went back to the port, and from there we flew back to the U.S. But this conversation kind of stuck in my mind, and so I went to a local Play It Again sports store, and I found a infielder's glove because he told me he played third base, and I bought it. It was, I don't know, $25, $30. I don't know what it was. But what I did, and Tim Johnson was going back down to Nicaragua shortly, so I got the glove for him, and I also got him a Spanish Bible. And I tucked the Bible inside the glove and kind of wrapped it up as a gift to Jose. And Jose came, wrote to me some months later, and he thanked me. He says, Pablo, thank you so much. The Bible you gave me, the local missionary has told me it will help me get out of the spiritual darkness that I I and my family are in right now. And we are so happy to have the opportunity to see spiritual light. Oh, by the way, thank you for the glove. The reality of the relationship, because he saw a relationship in me, he saw how I responded to him, he saw what my love for Jesus was, and he wanted that. And I believe, from what I understand, in fact, I have not been back to Nicaragua since, but I am believing that he is an active member in the church. So I am very grateful for the opportunity, not only to teach him a skill, but to give him an opportunity to come out of that spiritual darkness that is very prevalent in the indigenous people.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you sharing that story. It's a powerful one, but it's an example too of really the core of our mission is to support. And by supporting the missionaries or supporting the on the ground national pastors, we work alongside the nationals, whether it's in Central America or Bolivia or West Africa, Uganda. We've targeted and been intentional about training or even learning. We learn things from them as well, and that's been my experience. But we really see the impact of building community and making lifelong friendships and lifelong impacts with the indigenous people. And that's just from the team side. We're not actually there full time, but we get to experience that. And we get to have a piece of that enjoyment. So fast forward to 2025 as grounds facility manager. Explain a little bit about what you do and what that role entails.
My role now as property maintenance is to see that the yards are mowed. We have 10 to 12 acres of yard work that needs to be mowed every week. There's flower beds that need to be maintained. There's trees and bushes that need to be trimmed. And there's a lot of things that go behind the scenes. So I'm overseeing stateside teams. It shows a combination of several of my passions. One is the short-term work to help out ethnos in their training program out there in Missouri. But the other was that we had 3 students from Penn College of Technology, which is now an aspect of my oversight. I represent Friends in Action there on campus, and those 3 students were blown away by what missions is all about. They hear about it, they know a little bit about it. Those 3 students grew up in a church, so they heard missions. But to get there and be on site and to hear those missionaries there talk about what they are doing really kind of ignited a light, I think, in 2 of them for sure.
No, I appreciate you sharing that. And yeah, I was blown away. I know that my wife and I, you were out of town, and my wife and I went up for their career fair either last year or maybe the year before. And I was blown away by the interest of, I think maybe the interest, but the awareness that, oh, you can be construction skilled, or I want to have a desire to use my hands and still be involved in missions. So I think that's a really cool opportunity for us as we work with Penn Tech, and we're actually involved in LeTourneau University in Texas as well. So a great opportunity there as we take students. Susie and I take students there in Vanuatu this year. So Paul, you mentioned domestic teams, but we're an international organization. Explain to me a little bit, just for clarity for the audience, why we started to look into doing domestic teams as a part of our mission statement and how that ties into our mission statement. Because at Friends in Action, one thing I have learned is we are very focused on staying in our lane of supporting missions and mission organizations. So oftentimes we get the question, well, do you do humanitarian work? So clarify, one, how and why we started to get into domestic teams, and 2, why it's not considered humanitarian or disaster relief, let me say.
Yeah, one of the things that we, when I first came on, I was told right up front that we do not do anything here in the United States. Our role as a mission is to advance the gospel to those who are unreached, those who have never heard. And so the whole mindset was that there are mission agencies here in the United States that have the same focus that we do in terms of reaching the unreached, but they have a training facility here, or they have a Bible college here, and they are prepping these missionaries. Why don't we see if we can help them here? And they were excited about that, and we were excited about that. And so we began to look for opportunities, and come to find out that the training center in Missouri needed a lot of repair work. And so it was a great opportunity. I kind of look at it now as a first step, that volunteers can go stateside. It's a low cost, and it's not a hard travel, and we can introduce them to missions there because they explain what ethnos is all about. And we see the off-grid arm of that, and we can see the remote training that these students go through.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. When I saw the model of it, and you mentioned a little bit, is it provides an opportunity to kind of dip your feet in to missions and see what it looks like to serve. They're only a week long. They're not long trips like our international trips. So you don't have to take as much time off work, or you're not away from your family for that much long a time. They're less expensive. Most often you can have a wide range of skill levels because they always have something that can be done. So retirees and so forth and so on that are looking to serve, but definitely don't feel God calling them, overseas or for long flights, but they still want to serve and they still want to have that impact, and they are skill minded. This provides an awesome opportunity to support organizations that are reaching the hard to reach lost areas around the world. Based on your experience, what advice would you give someone who's considering going into full-time ministry, particularly with Friends in Action? What would be a piece of advice we can leave with them today?
When a person is considering missions, they need to realize that God has been preparing them, even though they were not aware of what missions is all about. And so I would say, don't consider themselves unqualified, because God pre-qualifies us and He pre-trains us. And so look in terms of what God has prepared you for and see how you can be involved in what He is doing now. Have a heart that's open and be willing to be used by God in small ways and allow Him to build those larger commitments.
Yeah, that's great advice. Be available and step into it. That's awesome. So let's wrap this up, Paul. It's been a great conversation. Like I said, my reintroduction to FIA was all because of you simply asking me, how about going to Vanuatu? So here we sit today. So it's been an honor to have you on the show. But what excites you about maybe what you're seeing or where we're heading for the future?
I think what excites me is the fact that there's more and more people that are catching on the fact that construction is a valid tool for missions. I think last year we had about 20 teams go out. That's a great increase from the 4 or 5 in those early years that I was with them. And we're looking at the possibility now of reaching into new fields and with new possibilities and new skill levels. And there's all kinds of opportunity now that God is stepping in and enabling us to accomplish what He wants us to get done.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being here today, Paul, and sharing your heart. I'm sure the audience can feel the passion you have for where God's called you through this journey and now with Friends in Action. So if you want to learn more about Paul, Emily will put his bio link in our show notes. You can learn more about him and Kathy and give the opportunity for you to help support him in his ministry. If you want to find more out about FIA, you can go to our website, www.fiaintl.org. If you like this show, or maybe you've gotten connected with us through this podcast or on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, share it with your friends. That's how we continue to grow. We, as a staff here, we love to be able to speak into people that just maybe want to find a little bit more out about missions, want to hear from our staff. We've tried to give it a variety of guests, and we'll continue to do that. But if you appreciate what we're doing, hit the subscribe button, share it with your friends. We'd be deeply appreciated. I think Paul's story is another testament of how staff members here at Friends in Action and you yourself can use the skills that God has given you. And if you don't feel valuable enough, or if you don't feel like you can be a Bible teacher or a church planner, but you have a passion to serve Christ, consider using your hands and feet to serve him too, because that's just as important. Everything and everybody that we impact here at Friends in Action has the opportunity to experience where God is leading them in missions. And we do that so we can share the gospel until all have heard. Thanks for being with us.